This movie takes us through a series of thrilling events around a cop, Jack Traven, who tries to save citizens from a psychopathic bomber. The first scene shows a security guard checking out a restricted area of a skyscraper, where he sees some working tools ahead. He then goes over to have a look, and upon reaching there he finds a man working on the elevator panels. The worker then claims he'd been sent for work. When the security requests to see a work order, the man stealthily takes out a weapon and eliminates him. Meanwhile, in the same building, a few workers are returning from a meeting, exchanging pleasantries. After some time, they all board an elevator. However, the elevator crashes immediately and the man in the restricted area pushes a button on the remote control. The elevator crashes below floors at quite a speed that almost gets everyone's heart leaping out. After it stops, the workers, in fear, scream for help. Upon hearing the news of the explosion, everyone outside the skyscraper took to their heels. The police arrived to handle the situation. The bomber has kept the workers as his hostage while in a request for a $30 million ransom. He threatens to blow off the emergency brakes of the elevator if his demands are not met soon. Jack and Harry are sent to examine the explosive device on the access panel. Jack and Harry finally arrive at the floor where the elevator is stuck. They immediately dash into an emergency room to get to the elevator through the access panel. As Jack and Harry arrive at their elevator, hanging in the air, Jack urges the workers to be calm, while Harry examines the explosives attached to the elevator. However, the workers are worried since the police had been sent to their rescue instead of the maintenance team. The duo examines the explosives, but couldn't find a way around them. After much deliberation, Jack and Harry immediately leave to figure out a way to save the hostages. Jack and his partner arrive at a construction adjacent to the skyscraper. They try to use a crane attached to the elevator. Unfortunately, the bomber grows suspicious and causes another explosion. Just before the elevator crashes lower, the hook on the crane holds it. The cops use the opportunity to save the workers before the crane drops the elevator. After saving the hostages, the duo suspects the bomber would be in one of the freed elevators, and they go after him. However, there's an open fire as the bomber shoots open the top of his elevator, letting Harry fall in. Jack also jumps in to avoid getting smashed as the elevator went up. The bomber, with dynamite strapped around himself, holds Harry hostage while Jack points his gun at him. In a bid to save Harry and capture the bomber, Jack shoots Harry in the leg as Harry told him to shoot the hostage. However, the bomber escapes, but he meets with an accident as the dynamites explode. In the next scene, Jack and Harry are awarded for their dedication and bravery. On the other hand, the bomber, which they'd presumed dead, watches the event from his home, plotting his next move. The officers have drinks at a bar where they also congratulate Jack and Harry. After some time, Harry makes Jack see that they only got spared by luck. He explains that luck could only get them so far, but he needed to do some thinking. Luck wouldn't be with him all the time. The next morning, a bus driver drops by a snack store where he sees Jack. After some small talk with Jack, he leaves for his bus with his snacks, and Jack follows suit. Jack waves at him as he approaches his car. Suddenly, the man's bus explodes, with everyone taking to their heels. Jack, in shock, runs towards the exploded bus to try to save the man, but it is too late. Just then, a phone rings for him at a phone booth near the scene, and to his surprise, the bomber speaks on the line. He expressed his disappointment after he'd invested 2 years into planning the elevator explosion. He then tells Jack about his new plan. The bomber has planted an explosive on a bus and requests his ransom within 3 hours. He gives the instructions on how the bus will ride, driving above 50 miles per hour once its speed reaches 50 miles to avoid an explosion. He also instructs him that no one must leave the bus once in it. Upon hearing that, Jack requests the bus number and dashes off to save the new hostages. Meanwhile, bus 2525 is in transit with some passengers, and Jack speeds off to locate the bus. Annie, one of the passengers, suggests to the driver to speed over other cars due to the traffic. Just then, Jack locates the bus in the traffic and runs over to get to inform them. However, the driver zooms off, thinking Jack was just a weirdo trying to get on the bus. Jack immediately stops a vehicle and forces the owner to another seat as he takes the wheels. He finally gets the bus driver's attention when the car owner writes to him on a piece of paper that there was an explosive on the bus. In shock, the bus driver slows down, and the explosives timer gets turned on. However, Jack instructs him to stay above 50 miles per hour. The police department has gotten wind of the first bus explosion, and Harry informs the commander about Jack. Jack jumps into the moving bus, leaving the car to its owner. However, the car crashes into a heap of trash by accident. As he settles on the bus, he instructs the driver on what to do, after which he calms everyone down without telling them about the bomb. Just then, a guy creates a scene with a weapon which leads to a bullet in the driver's arm. The driver loses balance on the wheel and Annie immediately steps in. Annie attempts to stop the vehicle. However, Jack breaks the news to them, leaving everyone in shock. He asks to be sure Annie could handle the wheels, instructing her to keep driving above 50 miles per hour. At the station, everyone gets busy as some cops hop on a helicopter to follow the bus. Jack checks out the explosive beneath the bus through the access panel just as Harry instructs him over the phone. He then tells Harry about the gold watch attached to the bombs. Just then, Annie calls Jack's attention to the long traffic ahead of them. They're left with no choice but to hit another lane recklessly to keep above 50, causing a collision with other vehicle. Back at the station, Harry instructs one of the officers to gather information on officers from 10 years ago regarding the gold wristwatch. Mark gets through to Jack, giving him directions to a freeway ahead. The speeding continues as they get to a hard turn where they're likely to tip over. Nonetheless, Jack makes everyone move to one side of the bus while he handles the wheels with Annie. They manage to make the turn without tipping off. Moving forward, Mark alongside other officers drives beside the bus to offload the passengers. Jack then explains to him that the bomber was watching them from a chopper and would detonate the bomb if anyone gets off. Almost immediately, a call comes in from the bomber, telling Jack not to get anyone off the bus. Jack pleads to get the injured driver off at least, and he allows it. Upon getting the driver off the bus, one of the passengers tries her luck. However, she ends up getting eliminated as the bomber detonates a bomb under her. The incident leaves everyone in shock, and an argument ensues as the passengers express their frustration. However, Jack calms them all down and comforts Annie, who is crying from the shock of the explosion. Just then, another problem pops up on the missing section of the freeway. Mark immediately informs Jack that there's a gap up ahead. Jack then informs the passengers about it, and they begin to panic. He urges Annie to speed over the gap, while the passengers hold tight. Fortunately, the bus flies over the gap and lands safely, with everyone rejoicing over yet another victory. Upon reaching an airport route, Jack asks Annie to drive through. No choppers are allowed to hover around an airport. Not quite long, the bomber calls Jack, instructing him on how to deliver his ransom. Jack thinks the bomber was just a psych in need of money, but the bomber explains that he'd earned it, giving clue that he was also an officer. Jack asks him to let him off the bus, and he allows him, telling Jack not to do anything funny. The passengers worry Jack might not return, but he tells Annie to keep circling the runway. Jack gets off the bus to inform the commander that he'd have to dismantle the bomb since he couldn't escape the bomber's view. After some time, Jack uses a wheel attached to the police vehicle to go under the bus. He follows Harry's instructions over the phone to try to defuse the bombs, however, he's unable to. Just then, the officers find the bomber's information, retired police, and they take off to his address, including Harry. Meanwhile, Jack faces a little accident while under the bus, leaving everyone worried, especially Annie. Luckily, they're able to pull him up, but in the process of saving himself, he'd punctured the gas tank. Jack informs Mark about it, and he instructs the officers to get a gas tank to drive alongside the bus. Meanwhile, Harry and other cops arrive at the bomber's address, but they meet their end as the house explodes. The bomber calls Jack to give him the news, telling him where to drop off the ransom. Jack freaks out upon the loss of his friend, Harry, and Annie calms him down. Just then, Jack notices that the bomber had been watching them through a camera on the bus all along. He then asks the passengers to sit without making any noticeable movement. Jack then informs the crew, and they take the help of a reporter to tape a video of the passengers on the bus. They loop the tape and replace it with the bombers. Meanwhile, they use the opportunity to offload the passengers before the gas runs out. Annie and Jack manage to get off the bus just before it crashes into a courier plane and explodes. The duo gets to have a romantic conversation before the cops arrive. After some time, the bomber calls in for his ransom, unaware of the explosion. Mark then tells him that it would be ready in a few minutes. Soon after the call, the police arrive at the location to deliver the ransom. Jack leaves Annie in an ambulance to join the team to capture the bomber. However, the bomber finally realizes he has been tricked. He then kidnaps Annie, pretending to be a cop who's been sent by Jack. Meanwhile, the cops think the bomber's late since he didn't approach the trash can where the ransom was kept. However, the tracker inside the box was moving, and Jack immediately runs over to check it out. Apparently, the bomber had taken the ransom through an underground railway tunnel, and Jack immediately follows him. Unfortunately, heat bombs wrapped around Annie and Jack couldn't shoot at him. The bomber takes off with Annie on a train, and Jack manages to join the train on time. The bomber handcuffs Annie to a pole before eliminating the train driver so he could take over. The bomber notices that Mark was on the roof of the train. He goes bonkers when he doesn't find his money. He rushes over to deal with Mark on the roof of the moving train. However, Jack manages to eliminate him. Jack rushes over to save Annie, however. They're faced with yet another issue as the train tracks were not completed. He tries to get the cuffs off her, but they're unable to. Annie urges him to save himself, but he stays back, hugging her while the train speeds off the tracks from the tunnel to the roads. Fortunately, Annie and Jack make it alive, and they lock lips for a new relationship. The movie concludes with passers-by taking pictures of them both.